On today's show, I'm joined by Nicole Baker, a coach who helps high achievers ditch perfectionism, cut out hustle culture, and start achieving their goals with fun, fulfillment, and a whole lot of free time. Having grown up in a family immersed in the personal development world, she's been attending seminars and absorbing personal growth tools her whole life, and she has since helped hundreds of perfectionists accomplish goals ranging from scaling to six figures, cutting their work time in half, and starting new healthy habits. She is the CEO of Life Coach Baker and the host of the Life Coach Baker podcast. We dive deep on the three types of perfectionism and how it shows up in different ways. I love when Nicole gets into the neuroscience of how the brain filters out what is important to us, which can lead to success or to self-sabotage. If you feel like you come up against the same struggles over and over in your life, this will be a revelation to you. Here's my conversation with Nicole. I want to welcome today Nicole Baker into Imperfection In Progress podcast. I am so excited that you are here, Nicole.
I am so excited to be here. Your title of your show is flawless. I love it.
It's one of those things where, and I mean, I'm sure you do, when you've lived the life and you are working your way through to the other side as much as you can when it comes with these. Imperfection is something that just seems like the thing that I am constantly trying to tell myself it's okay to be that. You don't have to be perfect. So that's the name.
Yes. Echo that. I know we're going to get really into that topic, but from the get-go, absolutely. That is 100% me.
So Nicole, tell us a little bit more, because I know I read your bio. It sounds all beautiful and professional, but why are you a coach who really focuses on perfectionists?
They always say you are the coach that you needed 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. And boy, is that the case. It's so much so. I'll give the Reader's Digest version. Basically, I was a musical theater performer actually for about 10 plus years. And I loved it. It was a wonderful place to be. It was where I came alive. I was a bullied kid. So I was very small. I was very quiet until I found theater. And I was like, oh my God, there's this way for me to, express my voice, express this weird beacon inside of me that is very strange and awkward and wonderful. And I started I'm a very high achiever perfectionist. So I was like, I'm not going to only go to college for musical theater. I'm going to go to the best college for musical theater. And then I'm going to be on Broadway. Da, 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 da. And as a result of going and getting into one of the best colleges in musical theater, my perfectionism hit a point where I was having almost numerous times a week anxiety attacks. I was so overwhelmed that, the things that I needed to do to get better, I would just be like, I can't handle it. I need to shut it down. As a result of being so anxious and stressed out all the time, I was drinking myself to blackout every weekend. I was getting sick every other week, probably because I was drinking myself to blackout every weekend. And it's not something I'm proud of, but it is part of my story. And as a result, my professor sat me down middle of my junior year and was like, hey, the road you're on right now, you're not graduating. That dream of yours ripped out from under you. And I called my dad, who is a coach. He's the original Life Coach Baker. And I basically was like, I've learned these tools my whole life. I grew up in personal development. I grew up walking across fire, climbing the poles, all this stuff. But I've never implemented this. I know it, but I haven't used it. I need you to help me use it. I need someone outside of myself to call me on my bullshit, basically. And thank God he did. A year and a half later, I graduated cum laude, still that high achiever in me. What can I say? And I realized how much perfectionism was a part of that journey. And so, I'll kind of flash forward a few years, but I started coaching other perfectionists. I left the musical theater world in a beautiful note. And I didn't mean that to be a little but I left the musical theater world and started coaching and found this love and I don't want to say obsession because that tends to be a negative leaning word, but love and deep understanding of perfectionism and just can constantly research it and never get bored. And here I am 5 years later, still coaching.
I'm just as an aside, I would love for anybody who's listening who is into, performance, arts, that type of thing. I would love to hear from you if this is something that you struggle with, because I grew up in a performing arts high school.
Shut up, that about me. Not.
Oh my God. More into music but although drama was my second, it was my minor. And again, just that whole got to do it right, got to be the best. And yet I'm very much an introvert. So just funny to hear. So curious if you're out there listening to this and you're like, yeah, I'm one of those people.
I'd love to know what your experience is. So
Yeah.
feel free
Same
to
here.
send us off an email, Instagram us. Would love to know what your experience is.
Please.
But okay, as an aside, that was just wanted to know. So I am curious, since we're talking around perfectionism, and on this podcast, I say, here's the three P's. It's the people pleaser, the perfectionist, and the procrastinator.
Mhm.
But when I talk about perfectionism, I'm talking about the person who's high achieving.
Yeah,
And so you also break perfectionism into those three.
I
So
do.
tell us some more about what is perfectionism.
Perfectionism, if I had to boil it down to literally just like the absolute core of it, it is I have expectations on myself, whether it's externally set or internally set. Internally set tends to be more that high achiever, procrastinator style. Externally set tends to be more that people pleaser style. Whatever my expectation is, if I don't meet 100 out of 100, better yet, 102 out of 100, then I'm not enough. Then I cannot be loved. Then I am a terrible, horrible thing about myself. And you might hear that and be like, oh, yeah, that's absolutely me. You might hear that and be like, well, I don't really resonate with that. When it's, I don't really resonate with that, that's because normally we've layered a bunch of other bullshit on top of it. So for procrastinators, for instance, it's so often, I see this literally on the daily. I am one person, I have 45 different goals, and yet I can't seem to go after any of them. Well, that's because you have this super high pedestal for yourself where you have to go after these 45 goals because you can, quote unquote. But because your brain is not processing those 45 goals because it's not made to, it hits the fight, flight, freeze button and you freeze, aka procrastinate. So, like, that's just an example. Like, while yes, it does boil down to this core that I am not enough. My standards are too high. I am never enough to meet them. But you can flavor it differently. Nice little, it's like a little seltzer water. You got the pamplemousse, you got the lemon lime, but it does show up for us all in very similar patterns. So we might have, different goals, but we do have very similar patterns in perfectionism.
So when you're talking to people that are perfectionistic, is this something that, like, are you born a perfectionist? Is it something that develops? How does this work?
I do think it's more nurture versus nature. Like I think about personality types that tend to lean more nature versus nurture, right? So, like, I was born a ENFJ, whatever, for going Myers Briggs. But my perfectionism came about because if we're getting, here we are getting real deep into the nitty gritty. When I was in middle school, I was this kid who, for my city, I come from a very health conscious town to the point where if you are even slightly quote unquote overweight, shame. It is just like, you are not enough. You are terrible. I was an overweight kid. I was weird. I liked music. I, had a lot of emotions. And anytime I felt anything out of 10, I would just cry, like I was just a very emotional kid. And as a result, other kids would stuff me into bathrooms. They would call me names that I will literally never utter to another human being. They would hit me. They would, say things that just were not okay. And in those moments, I realized that if I am not perfect for everyone else, if I am not what everyone else needs me to be, I get hurt. And that decision shaped 20 years of my life. And I did tend to lean into the high achiever perfectionist, absolutely. But my number two very closely was people pleaser, which those are two things that should not go together. Like, they're like, you want to be the best in the room, but you want to make sure you don't step on any toes, right? Like, I had that because of those experiences and because of what I took from them. Now, that can be also like, I see this in a lot of high achievers, like parents had very high expectations for their kids. They wanted them to be the best in the choir or the best on the sports team. And, until they weren't showing them love or they weren't showing them kindness. For procrastinators, it tends to be a lot of, they take on way too much because they feel like it's expected of them. And as a result, they just like freeze, So I'm really leaning into it's nurture versus the nature.
It's interesting. I think with most of the people that I have dealt with as well, I find it's more nurture.
I'm so excited to invite you to the Elevated Entrepreneur Masterclass series. This free 12-day online series features 12 incredible women experts helping female entrepreneurs to release the hustle and grind of business and step into clarity and ease with intuitive strategies. If you would like to build your business with more simplicity and flow and less overwhelm and stress, then this is for you. And as an added bonus, you will have access to free resources from our experts worth over $600 just for registering. Register for the Elevated Entrepreneur Masterclass Series right now at elevatedseries.com. And if you want to up-level your masterclass experience, or you've missed a few days, just grab the VIP All Access Pass for 1-year access to the entire series for just $47. Now, back to the episode.
And I mean, I'm sure we probably all have a bent towards something more as far as the nature part of it.
Yeah.
But as far as fully adopting it, and even the fact that you decided to take on that belief that if you didn't please everybody, you'll get hurt, even when maybe that was no longer the case physically, as far as that.
Yeah.
But we've kept that belief for so long, and it's such a deep one that then it plays out in the rest of our life, even when we aren't, being stuffed in the bathroom or a
And
locker or whatever.
it's so sneaky. Like, it came up in ways, it still comes up. I mean, I'm 5 years into deep, deep, deep personal development, deep, deep, deep personal growth work. And still sometimes I'll have moments where I'm like, whoa, that was not me. But like, that was old Nicole. Like, let's talk to her. Let's talk to her for a second. Like, here's a short example. I'm a big runner. I love running. It's something that makes me feel like I'm actually coming alive. And I recently got a minor foot injury. I'm not going to call it an extreme one by any means, but it's basically taken me out of commission for a minute. And old me would have been like, that was not part of the plan. You have to continue running because you can. You can walk on it. So you can absolutely continue. Like, like that high achiever, like, this is your expectation and you're not meeting it right now. So you have to do whatever it takes to meet it. And I was like, or I could just listen to what my body is needing, which it's needing ice, stretching, and biking instead for a minute. Like, I just like kind of rolling with the punches. But like, that voice came up for a second. But now I've done so much work where I'm able to catch it. I know what that voice sounds like. I know where it feels in my body. Like, there's a certain area that tightens, and I know when to catch it. And sometimes maybe I'm a little blindsided, and my fiance, sweet man that he is, has to be like, you heard yourself, right? You just heard yourself say that. And I was like, thank you. Yes, I did. Let's change this up. Like, I think it's important to have people who can call you out on it and as well. I'm really answering your questions with long form answers. I apologize.
No, I love this. I think it's important that we have examples too, because sometimes we don't recognize this in ourselves, right? We can be so blind to it. And then we hear a story and we're like, oh, I do that all the time, right? And suddenly
Absolutely.
we recognize it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me, when we're talking about, all these things, especially if we're dividing this up into people pleasing and high achieving and procrastination, there's some obvious ways that it can hold us back, but I'd love to hear, just in general, what do you see in these areas as far as just not being able to make progress in our lives?
I'll start with the procrastinator because that's one I tend to talk to pretty fairly often. The way it holds you back is you feel like you're not living up to your quote unquote potential. You feel like there's so much more inside of you, and yet you're so goddamn frustrated that you can't seem to get there. That it seems like everyone else has figured it out and you haven't. So not only do you feel like you're holding yourself back, but then you beat yourself down because you're quote unquote holding yourself back, which lowers your motivation. It lowers your positive self-talk. It makes you like kind of fall more into that like anxious, like, you tend to look more at the bad than the good, like so on and so. It really is like a cascading spiral. For the high achiever, there's always this element of, I'm not there yet. I'm not good enough yet. Like, you can finish your entire to-do list, but then there's 3 things that you added while you were doing your to-do list that you didn't get done, and you're only fixating on those 3 things. I see this a lot with high achievers. They'll celebrate, quote unquote, they'll celebrate a achievement they've just done, but then they'll say, but I'm not there yet. I'm not at this next level yet. And I'm like, you have been working towards this level that you're currently celebrating for a year, for 2 months, for however long a time. You've been fixating on this, saying, this is when I'll finally be happy. This is when I'll finally be free. And now you're saying it's another level. When will it ever be enough? And that is a pattern I see time and time again. With the people pleaser, however, it's constantly putting other people on a pedestal, whether it's their opinions, their schedules, their voices. It is shrinking yourself so there's quote unquote space for other people, which is bullshit. There's space for everyone. And so often people pleasers have a lack of trust in their own voice. in their own tenacity, in their own determination, that they feel like by putting other people on a pedestal, it's, easing that conflict. It's easing that, like, I don't have to make anyone uncomfortable. And by doing that, you're shoving yourself down. There we go. Yeah, those are probably the biggest patterns I see within the three.
It's interesting watching this in somebody's life and being on the outside as a coach, right?
Yeah.
It gives you this different perspective. And often we see these blind spots that the person themselves don't see. But also, I think it's interesting that there are such good parts about being a perfectionist. And often the good parts, we feel we're not doing them good enough. So even the good parts aren't good for us.
Mhm. Well, because so often perfectionists, you could be doing 90% of the stuff right, but 10%, that's what you're fixating on. And where your focus goes, there's a great quote, where your focus goes, energy flows. So if I'm focusing on that 10% that I'm not enough yet, 10% that didn't get done, 10% that da 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 da, my energy is going to meet me there. It's going to meet me at not enough, which then I will continue telling myself I'm not enough. And that just doesn't stop at the 10%. That bleeds into everywhere else of your life. And
Yeah.
it's detrimental. And I don't think people, I'm curious if you see this too, Don. I don't think people understand how detrimental it is because we as a society have kind of now begun making light of I don't feel like I'm enough. I see so many reels joking around about I'm not enough patterns showing up in real time, like making light of it, like, and then other people being like, oh my God, it's me. Oh my God, it's me. Oh my God, it's me. And it's like, it's great to feel seen. It's great to see like, oh my God, that's someone else having the same pattern that I am. But then we just accept it as part of life. We just say, oh, that's just part of it. And I've talked to people recently who feel like, well, because everyone does it, do I have to do anything about it? And it breaks my heart because I'm like, well, technically, no. Technically, no. You don't have to. But the life that you keep telling me about that you want to be living at, this person doesn't belong there. This I'm not enough BS that you're telling yourself does not belong there because you can get to that level with all the accolades, all the whatever. But if you still have this mindset, it will still not feel like enough. And that
Yes.
really hits them. So that's my
Yes.
mission. I want to change this narrative. I want everyone just like accepting that that's good, like, part of life. Not.
The whole idea around like self-worth and, the worthiness of, being accepted, belonging. I mean, those are some just normal innate needs
Yeah.
that we have. And at the same time, nobody outside of us will ever make us feel that we're enough. Like that's an inner
Yeah.
piece. That's an inner work that we have to dig through. And I think that's the hard part is when somebody, you're right, is willing to just sit in that and live in it
Yeah.
because you can't ever rise above a certain level in order to achieve what you want to achieve if you have not done that inner work.
Yes. And I think that we've bought into this huge lie that when we have, like, I saw this the other day. When I have a morning routine, then I'll feel like I have my stuff together. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. Like, because, yeah, sure. Like, someone who maybe respects themselves, someone who really believes in their capabilities and their goals, and they want to have the habits to match it. Yeah, maybe they have a morning routine. But they didn't get a morning routine and then started feeling like they have their stuff together. They decided they want to have their stuff together and they're going to start acting like it. And then, oh, hey, a morning routine appeared. Look at that. How interesting. It goes the other way around. And we have to constantly remind ourselves. I have to constantly remind myself that all the time.
Definitely if it's something like you're struggling to maintain something, right? If you're struggling to maintain a workout routine, a morning routine, like whatever it is, whatever the thing is that you're struggling to maintain, really all it points out is you haven't done the inner work in order for you to be at the level of maintaining it. So which comes first? It's the inner
Yeah.
work. Always.
Always. It's that, like, I was just talking about this on another podcast this morning, actually. These last 3 months have been the months of my life where I don't think I have ever loved myself more. Like, truly unrelenting love Nicole Baker, who she is, not what she's achieved, but her brain, her body, her, you know, tenacity, I love this about myself. And what's amazing is that when I had this, like all the pieces came together, it was like everything that I've ever wanted in my life just happened. And it was almost like the universe, God, creation, whatever you want to call it, was just waiting for me to put this final puzzle piece together until it said, here you go. Let me open the floodgates and let things just pour out to you. And I've had this like mantra in my head for 3 months now. It's like, it just gets to be this good. It just gets to be this good. I get to receive this. I get to love this. And does that mean that this is something I'd love to hear your take on, Don? One of the things I hear over and over again is self-acceptance. Well, if I start loving myself, doesn't mean I'm going to become complacent or mediocre or I'm going to lose my drive. I've built an entire personality around being a really driven person, yada, yada, yada. And the answer is so not the case. Self-acceptance is not complacency. Self-acceptance is an inner drive and fulfillment that I never knew I could tap into. But it never feels like it's a car tank hitting empty at the end of the day. It feels like it is always full. And it feels so good. And again, I'm in a chapter of this right now, new level, new devil, who knows what could happen. But right now I'm just going to like open my arms and just receive, receive, receive. Thank you. Doesn't mean I'm not working my ass off. Of course not. But it's not from a place of I'm not enough. It's from a place of like, oh my God, life is so fun. Why? So like, let's do it, So that's real. That's like a huge thing that's plaguing my mind right now. It's just like, how can we figure this out? How can we start getting everyone to feel like self-acceptance is the answer to being that high achiever?
Yeah. There is such a beauty and like a joy that comes from that place where internally you feel, I guess instead of the word complacent, I would think of the word where you feel really complete, right? Not that your task is complete, not that your jobs are done, but you feel in yourself that you are enough as is right now to take on whatever it is.
Mm.
And that changes then the attitude that we're moving forward with, the excitement about what's coming, the possibilities that could open up, and being in that place of gratitude and like, yes, like this is all happening for me. And I've worked hard to get here, but at the same time, I deserve to be here.
Mhm.
And it's just such a different place. I love that you're experiencing that right now.
Well, and it is. And I think that people tend to kind of brush it aside because they're like, it's not that easy. There's no way. It's not that easy, guys. Like, come on. And it's like, we tend to make life so extra hard on ourselves because we feel like when we've like hurtled over this mountain and like we come out crawling and covered in mud, then we can feel proud of ourselves because we did the super hard thing. It's like, well, I can't feel proud of myself if I just do something super easy. But here's why it is this easy. If we're going just solely neuroscience-y, I love neuroscience. It's fascinating to me. It's the premise of how I coach. And there's this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system. Basically, this huge filter in our brain that's taking in 80 million bits of information at any given moment happening around us. Your hair brushing off the side of your face, your blood pumping through your left ear, the 6 strips of KT tape that I have on my left leg right now because of this running injury. Like we're taking in all of this information. But if we were actively aware of all of it, we would not be functioning. We'd be in the fetal position in the corner. So we have this reticular activating system to filter through what's important to us, what's important to Nicole, what's important to Dawn. I'm going to filter through that for her. And if we're constantly saying to my reticular activating system, well, looking at the 10% of things I'm not doing right, that's what's important to me. I'm going to continually doing that. Your reticular activating system is going to be like, great, I'm going to keep showing you the 10% of shit you haven't done yet. Versus if I start saying it gets to be this good, it gets to be this good, it gets to be this good, my RAS is going to start showing me all the reasons why, congratulations, Nicole, it just gets to be this good. And that's why a lot of people, I think when they start doing these exercises, they're like, whoa, 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 this is too easy. It can't be this easy. Like, no. And then they like shut it down. Your reticular activating says, great, you're looking for the hard stuff. Let me hand you chronic illness. I've seen this happen again and again. Let me hand you a huge rejection. Let me hand you a partner walking out on you. Like, it starts self-sabotaging you. And so literally, I like to explain the brain patterns behind it because I feel like it gives something for people to tangibly lock onto. So Yeah, it is this easy, but that's because your brain is programmed to flip and do it. You don't have to do anything. You don't make your heart beat. It just beats. Same thing with this.
Yeah. And which way would you rather be working on? The 10% of garbage, right? Or the 90% of, wow, like, look how things are going.
Yeah.
Like, you actually are in control of what you decide to put as the important thing for that RAS system in your brain.
And yet so many people aren't doing it. And don't get me wrong, it's not like we tell our RAS, I would like to focus on all the abundance in my life. And then it says, great, you're good for the next 10 years. No, it takes conditioning. I always say we don't go to the gym, do one crunch and get a six pack. You have to keep going and keep going and keep going and clean up a bunch of other areas of your life. And there's so much more to it. But it it's truly as simple as, like I'm a big believer in sticky notes. I think sticky notes might just change the world. And if I write down, it gets to be this good, it's slap a sticky note on my monitor. It's the phrase out of sight, out of mind. Well, this is in my sight. It is in my mind. My reticular activating system sees it multiple times a day. And that conditioning takes a lot less time than if I'm just relying on my willpower to remember it.
Yes. So tell us, in kind of closing up things today, if there was one thing we could do to start making these changes, to start overcoming these areas that are holding us back, what do we do?
Start getting curious about it rather than being like, okay, I have a problem clearly, but like, let me just shove that problem away. Let me just focus on the good. Let me focus on all the things that I want at the end result, blah, blah, blah. Kind of going back to what you were talking about, Dawn, like you got to do that work. You got to do if you're in a hole, you have to get some stairs to get you out of the hole before you can jump into the sky. So some ways that you can get some stairs going are get curious about this subject of learning, of growing, of self-love, of whatever, has rung true from you from this conversation. There's a podcast about it, I'm sure. There's a book written on it. There's an audiobook about it. Audiobooks count. I don't know whoever said, oh, it drives me insane. Whoever said that like audiobooks don't count as books, screw you. Absolutely not. That's a perfectionist thinking, in my opinion. So like there's an audiobook about it. There's a TED talk about it. Start getting curious because you become what you consume. And if you are consuming right now, social media, people say like my life just sucks and it's okay, blah, blah, blah. You're going to start to accept that as capital T truth. Versus if you start, listening to a TED talk about fun and play and self-acceptance, you're going to start getting curious about that subject. So I truly think curiosity will change the world, but all of us need to learn how to tap into curiosity a lot more than we are. So I have a podcast, you're listening to one right now. You're doing a great job. I have a podcast. It's all about perfectionism as well. It's called the Life Coach Baker podcast. So I think I actually have a whole book recommendation list episode and actually do have a personal book recommendation list. So if you want to send me a DM on Instagram, I'm happy to send it over to you. I'm at Life Coach Baker on Instagram, but just start getting curious about this work because it's there.
So tell us, which one of the 3 Ps do you most resonate with?
High achiever, hands down. Or sorry, for you, perfectionist. Absolutely. I used to be a procrastinator. In college, I was definitely a procrastinator. In growing up, I was absolutely a people pleaser. But this high achiever has always been the underlying current. And then the second I decided to start a business, boy, did she come out and fire. It was aggressive. But it's the one that I have to consistently remind myself about. And also, it's where I think my biggest strength lies, is being that high achiever. But now it's from a place of that self-acceptance and self-love, which is very different.
Yes, there's the good side. There's the good side coming out. So in our show notes, I'm going to put an amazing offer that Nicole is giving you. It's called Unsubscribing from Perfection, the package, and she's giving it to you at 50% off with the code Imperfection50. You can find it in the show notes, but tell us a little bit about what this offers.
So going back to our 3 types of perfectionists, right? If I'm using my language here, I have the high achiever, the procrastinator, and the people pleaser. And every single one of these types has different self-sabotaging patterns, has different thought processes, has different ways of also unsubscribing from these behaviors or overcoming perfectionism. And so what I did is I made 3 mini courses that encompass what is this type of perfectionist? How do you overcome it? And it's very hands-on for a mini course. We have a huge workbook in it. I walk you through 3 different lessons around it. A lot of people have told me, they're like, this is definitely like a weekend course. This is less so a mini course. It's more of a weekend course. But what I decided to do is package all 3 together because, like I just explained, I could be all 3 types. Yeah, I most identify with the high achiever, but I've had times in my life where I fall into procrastinator or people pleaser. So I packaged all 3 of these together. It's normally $38, but with the 50% off, it's $19. I've had, I think, a bunch of people bought it in January. I've heard from them in February, and they said it was the best $19 they've ever spent in their life. So get your hands on it. It should not be $19, but I want it to be accessible for everyone. So please know that that is there for you, and it is extremely hands-on. You leave with a lot of tactical takeaways. It's something I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of that course. It's fun.
Thank you so much for this. I mean, if you hadn't even given it at 50% off, it's an amazing price. So make sure you take advantage of this and grab it in the show notes and connect with Nicole. I mean, all her info is there in the show notes, but I have to tell you, I love watching all of your Instagram reels. They're fun, they're funny, but they're really, really good tips and tools too to help, just again, reassess, think, move forward, get some ideas. It's so good.
Thank you. That means a lot. I think that really means a lot. Thank you so much.
And thank you for being a part of Imperfection in Progress today. I love that we were here and able to share some time together.
Same here. Thank you for having me, Dawn.